Here is the Clarity guitar. We've been applying finish, well, very regularly over the last several months, building it up slowly. Teak oil, Danish oil, and even a little bit of true oil. Now the problem has been that the Claro walnut, we wanted it to be as natural as possible and decided not to do any filler. And what that meant was that because it's such a soft wood, it actually continued pulling in finish for much longer than I thought would be the case. And I ended up having 30 or 40 coats of teak oil, which normally wouldn't be, well, that would normally be huge overkill. And I gave up after a while. We've put on several coats of true oil, which is a higher building oil and lacquer finish. And now I'm going to be doing the very last coat of teak oil, because teak oil gives the finish we want. True oil, at least, is a similar varnish and oil mix, but gives a glossier look, and that's not what we're after. Finishing is difficult, and you can make it easier by making sure you have the right tools. And you can actually turn a bit of tissue into a tool and effectively make yourself a nice pad, and it will do the job. Now the stage we're at here is this has been rubbed down, the true oil finish has been rubbed down with a 4-0 steel wool or wire wool to give a uniformly matte finish. And it has filled the pores a little bit, and it's brought me to a point where I think we should be able to do the last coat. Interestingly enough, most papers have got clay in them and act as a polishing medium themselves, a very fine sandpaper. And I reckon if I did this just on this finish, I'd get a nice matte sheen after a while. And this is why I like applying my oils with these. Because not only does it apply the oil, it rubs it in and rubs down the finish, and hopefully gives us the perfect finish. Finally. I should also be wearing gloves. One of the important rules is I don't want loads of finish to build up on the sides. If I came in from the edge and pushed down in that direction, it would pool on the sides and dribble down. Always work out from the center to the edge, whatever finish you're applying, especially when you're working on the back of the neck. And if you do see any spill as you're going through, clean it up as you go. Now the teak oil, it depends on the climate that you're in. If it's particularly warm where you are, it'll start curing pretty much immediately, and that's already quite tacky. This is a relatively old, very old tin of oil, and it is starting to gel quite rapidly. Now it's important that you clear this off when it does start to dry. Get yourself a clean bit of tissue and wait. Effectively, you start to feel with your finger, this is why I don't like wearing gloves really, you start to feel when it's got a bit of give in it. And that can take anything from 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how warm or cold your workshop environment is. Now I've waited, it's fairly warm in here, it's just got tacky. I've got resistance as my finger's going across, and it's so difficult to describe. It's got resistance. Now, starting in the same place you started when you were applying it, rub all the excess off. I tend to do this against the grain. I suppose it's a habit from the old violin making days, really. You do it against the grain and it fills the grain, and you end up with supposedly a better finish. As I'm doing this, I'm questioning myself. The most important thing is that you clean absolutely everything off. What finish you want will already be in the guitar. If your tissue starts sticking to the finish and leaving little bits of white fluff around, you've left it too long. And you will notice that I've only done the front. If I had a very cold workshop, as opposed to a medium cold workshop, I would probably have had enough time to do the whole instrument and then start wiping it off. But I'm not going to take that risk, because there's few things worse than having to try and rescue yourself from finish that has cured too hard. The last coat of teak oil. In this sunshine, or at least with the windows down there, you can see that lovely matte shine. It's going to be a stunning guitar. From the other side, less reflections. It's still got character. This is the critical bit. I'm going to do the back and sides at the same time. You always have to be aware that a little bit of this oil or finish is certainly going to end up on the front, and we don't want that. We also want this to stay as clean as possible. Back to the back bit. I've put the finish on and it has started curing, and this is where you start getting messy. So I don't want to have sticky gloves. I've also applied finish on the neck here. I don't want to have sticky gloves putting latex on the neck. So I wrap my hand in paper and go from there. Now begins the rush to get everything off. If anything dries to a hardness, well, we end up with trouble. You have to basically, if it dries hard, you end up having to rub it down like you would a lacquer with fine wet and dry paper and all of that. And you can treat teak oil and tung oil and true oil and these things like a lacquer, because for the most part they actually are an oil and lacquer composite material. You absolutely can't afford to let any of this dry. If you end up with even a drop or two that aren't removed, Can you hear the concentration in my voice as I talk? If you even end up with a drop or two, you're going to have to rub them down with wet and dry paper or something like that, and you will end up with a strange area in your finish that isn't homogeneous with the rest. And at this level of guitar, what we're after is absolute perfection, basically. Understandably. And I'm now in a rush against that curing. And seeing as the sides were the first area that I applied on at this stage, make sure you check the front just to see that nothing's gone on there. And from here it's a case of a little bit of elbow grease. And as it cures, it becomes a little bit harder, obviously. Ha, that was a silly statement. My tool is no longer a tool. Even when you're removing the finish, you want something that's solid and solid and predictable, really. I'm cleaning the gun cup that's ended up in there as well. Little corners. That's where it likes to hide. What beauty. Watch out for holes as well. Tuner holes, controls, things like that. It tends to, it's a hole. Your finish will pour through if you apply too much and end up on the other side of the headstock that we've already done and cause no end of hassle. And hassle is certainly not something that we're after. You also mustn't forget to do the back plates if you're building a guitar like this with timber back plates. That neck is just beautiful. Alright, a quick check just to see visually. Of course I'm seeing visually. Okay, now get to a new section of the tissue, and I'm going over one last time That neck is stunning. I nearly forgot the back plates. Right. That is done. Check the front. And I'm going to hang this out of the way to cure. Although I will give you a close-up in a second. And I can stay there while I see if I've left it too late. No, not quite. Now, if you do leave it too late, the very first thing to do is try and apply more teak oil. If you've got new teak oil on top of semi-cured teak oil and then rub it off immediately, then you should remove the semi-cured stuff. If you leave it to just cure, then you start having to treat it like an instrument with lacquer on it. And well, one of the beauties of an oil finish is that you don't have that final rubbing down to 600, 800, 1500, 2500 and then polishing. You don't have all of that. The application process is the final polishing process. And I think it takes a little bit longer, well, it certainly takes longer, but it's less stressful because I'm not sitting here worrying about whether I'm going to rub through the lacquer. Because I'm not. I'm purposefully removing as much of the oil that's pulled on the surface, at least, as I possibly can. Backplate's done. All looking rather lovely. The neck has come up to a much greater shine, and that's because the rosewood is much less porous. I suspect that the back of this headstock is one of my favourite parts of this instrument. Anyway, the finish is still curing, and I'm going to have to leave it for 3 or 4 days at least, just to see how it ends up. Oh, there's a bit of lint on there. And but I suspect that we're done, and it's time to move on to the next stage of this build. Awesome.